Okay, so you you don't get to see this, but this is like take 10 maybe, and I'm on this path. This is the uh, Great Southern Railway, uh, Great Southern Rail Trail. Yeah. Anyway, and I've got about 50 kilometres to go on this track before I hit the roads. Anyway, so the point I was actually trying to get at in this video was to tell you some truths. And, people know that I like to have a chat and I'll, talk about different things. But one thing, if they really look at anything I talk about, rarely will I ever talk about details about my life. And so today I'm going to share some details, not all of them, because some of them are irrelevant for the general public to know. But I thought I'd better share some details about why I am on this 4,500 kilometre track. It's because I don't have a choice. I jokingly mentioned it in the first video a couple of days ago that this is the homeless life. Reality is I am now homeless. Not houseless like I used to be when I was van lifing. Full on homeless. No money in the bank, no job prospects. I don't even have any clothes to go to an interview. I have nothing left except what fits in there. It's hard to admit that, really. People think that I'm wealthy, or people think that I've got income streams. But no, I don't. You see, without going into too much of the history, because it will just be an hour-long video, after my marriage broke up, I spiraled really hard. And I was looking for meaning and I couldn't find anything. So I decided to end my life. Just what it is. And those who really know me, I mean like those who know the details, and there's only maybe 2 or 3 people on the planet who know the details, I haven't had the best of luck in this life. And so I've learned to put on a face, to smile through it, and never give anyone ammunition. It was a self-defense mechanism. It served me well. In a lot of ways it still does. But doesn't mean it's right. And so it's a bit unfair to lie to you, because a lot of people who watch my videos are friends and acquaintances who don't know this. There's a cyclist coming. It's funny, I just don't want people knowing my business, except you. Anyway, so I basically drained the bank account, traveled the world. And the plan was when the money ran out, then I ran out. That's what it was. And while I was traveling the world, I was getting more and more comfortable with death. I don't see death as the same as a lot of other people. I don't see death as some grand loss. It's a bit like the analogy of a baby in the womb. If you ask, say, twins, I've heard this story before and I'll share it here quickly. Let's say there's twins in a womb and they're enjoying this beautiful environment. They're being blessed by, their Mother Earth and being nourished and nurtured and cared for. And that's their reality. And sometimes I'll see an apparition of a hand across the belly, or the pressings of the bladder or something. I don't know, but that's their reality, right? And one twin asks the other, it's like, well, what happens at the end of this 9 months? And the other one says, well, we'll die, and so they get to the end of the 9 months, their life is over. But then their life isn't over. They're simply born into a new world, a harder challenge. They've been nurtured for 9 months, and now they've got to be dependent for many years as a human being, until we become self-sufficient. And some of us just never get there. But, but generally speaking, it could take a decade. A 10-year-old can become self-sufficient quite easily. I was living out of home by 11, right? So it's not impossible. But I see death pretty much the same way as the baby in the womb. Is at the end of the 9 months isn't death. It's just the evolution to the next stage. And I sure hope it's easier than harder. Anyway, enough about that. What happened was my time was up anyway, right? And so when I left Canada, I came back to Australia and got pretty much all my affairs in order. And then I decided that I wanted to go on a trip again down to Tasmania. So I did that Tasmania trip. And when that came to a close, it dawned on me that I should just go till there's nothing left. Help as many people as I can along the way. See as much as I can along the way. And when that money's out, then end it. Since it was going to happen anyway. So I went back to Canada and I bought Big Fella and I drove across Canada and I went down to New York and Manhattan, and I went to England for a week and caught up with a dear old friend, Martin. And, he planted a seed in my head. He was like, well, why don't you just move to England? And I was like, why didn't I think of that? Like, I could have just started again in England. My fear was going back to Australia and having to be permanently reminded over and over again about this loss. So I went back to America, and then I pretty much hightailed it. America was not a fun place. I didn't like it very much at all. The Midwest. Sorry to anyone who's in the Midwest. I didn't like it at all. New York was wonderful. Maine was wonderful. Long Island was interesting. But I didn't have the best of time in America, mentally and things. And so I just basically drove across America and got back to Canada, and I gave Big Fella to someone who was trying to get back into a home so he could support his daughter better. He was doing a great job. He lived in his van, and when he had his daughter, he'd get a hotel and things like that. But as she gets older and this becomes more frequent, that becomes more untenable, and it's almost cheaper to rent than it is to keep getting hotels multiple times a week, right? So he decided that he was going to go back into a home, but he didn't have the ability to get the bond and all that kind of stuff, like the first and last month, all that kind of stuff, and security deposits. And so I decided to give him the van so he could sell it and fund it, which it did. And I'm really glad that it did. That gave me such joy that I had a hand, even if it's a small hand, in him being able to get back into a house so he could, you know, provide for his daughter a much more stable environment. And I know he's going to miss van life, and I know he's going to pine for the good old days, but in reality, he knows also his daughter comes first. And so I decided to do that for him, to help him. But when I left Canada, I literally left with nothing. And I came back to Australia with the full intention of just ending it. But then that question came in my mind again, why don't I move to England? And so I decided to sell Casper, and I pretty much just got on a plane and went back to England pretty quickly, within 3 weeks or something, 4 weeks. But what I didn't have lined up properly was my work visa. And if I'd stayed in Australia for a couple more months, maybe 2 months, I could have got that sorted and then gone to England, and I could have stayed there indefinitely on a permanent work visa. But I didn't, because I made an irresponsible decision and just wanted out of Dodge, just to get away from the permanent reminders. And I left and went to England. Lo and behold, I couldn't get work, and I burnt through the money pretty quickly because the Australian dollar to the pound was pretty shocking. I think $1 Australian dollar gets you less than 50 cents, that kind of thing, right? 50 pence. So after 3 months, I was out of money again. This time I have nothing. So around 2 weeks before I bought my airline ticket back to Australia, I still hadn't decided what I was going to do, and I bought the implements to end my life. I decided that I'm going to go to Scotland and just find a beautiful loch and say goodbye to this world. Through a strange set of circumstances, my friend Martin, his mother passed away, and he knew that I was looking at going back to Australia. He's one of the only people who knows how difficult I've been finding life, but I've also never really fully told him the truth either. And, you know, that's because, as with any deep truth, you always want to hold back just a little bit. That's what I found anyway. So I decided not to, because I didn't want to add an additional burden to him. Because it kind of would have come down to him to take care of things. And I didn't want that to be on top of him also having to take care of his mother's estate as well. So I was working out my choices, and I came to 3 choices that I was comfortable with. One was come back to Australia and end it here. I literally came back with about $1,000 in my pocket, and I had to buy a tent, I had to buy a sleeping bag, I had to buy some form of shelter. Because I was literally homeless when I arrived. The second I got off that aeroplane in Melbourne, I was homeless. In fact, when I arrived in Melbourne, I didn't even have a tent. I bought it when I got here. So I had no shelter, I had nothing. I had no sleeping bag, nothing. So my 3 choices were die, become a homeless person in the city and beg for money, or Forrest Gump it and walk across the country. So I decided to do the latter. My ego and my pride was too big for the one in the middle, to be homeless on the street. So I chose to walk from the southern point of Victoria to the northern point of Queensland, 4,500 kilometres, because it's going to take me more than 6 months to do it, which means at least by the end of it, I'll be in shape. I have no idea how I'm going to feed myself on this trip. I have no idea how I'm going to survive on this trip. And I'm not asking for any help, but I'm just leaving it to chance about what happens. And maybe I meet someone on this trip that gives me the right nudge in the right direction, and circumstances change. Or it means nothing, and this life really means nothing, and I ran out of steam. I don't want people to feel sorry for me. These are the combinations of my life choices. And, you know, hindsight's great. If I had done things differently, like if I didn't go to Canada and drive across Canada and America and all that stuff, I would have had more than enough money to get my visa sorted, go to England and be quite happy. I loved it. Absolutely loved England. But that's not the path that happened. It was definitely not even on my radar when I made those decisions. I wish it was, but it wasn't. So here I am on a 4,500 kilometre hike with 135 kilometres down. I got about 4 days of good weather before it gets rainy again. I've spent the last bit of cash that I have on a new tent that can handle rain. That's important. And I'll donate the bivvy to charity, so at least somebody has some form of shelter somewhere. But if you do want to help, and I don't mean, you know, asking help, if you want to give me money or anything, I'm not going to ask for that. But if you do want to help, buy my book. It's a great way of helping. It's a great book, Dark Matter. I have 2 more in the wind, Moloch and 86400, which is my favorite one. But that would help. That would support. It's not charity. That's you buying a book and enjoying the content. It's a great book. It's not huge. It's a small novel, fat novella, as I call it. But that would help a lot, you know. I don't want people to buy something they don't want to buy, but, you know, it's a practical way that you could help. And it's the closest I'm going to get to asking for help. I'm a stubborn prick. Maybe one day I might write a biography or an autobiography on all the shenanigans from when I grew up in a boys' home to now, and all the terrible decisions. And maybe, just maybe, I might call it What Not to Do. Well, now you know what's going on. What you do with that information is up to you. I'm just going to get on with walking. you know, and if I get a job or something like that in the meantime, something turns around, then I might put this hike on hold. It doesn't mean I'm not going to finish it one day, but if nothing changes, then I'm just going to keep going until I can't go any further. So maybe I'll see you on the trail.